What up, people of the internet? Demo Ghost here, and I'm back with some more Guilty Gear Strive news. The developers of Guilty Gear Strive have released another developer's background to give a little bit more insight into what their thoughts are going into making the game, as well as them kind of basically just talking to us to, you know, give their thoughts and also kind of acknowledge feedback and tell us where they're going with the future of this game. So this is really nice. This is the second one that they've released, and this one goes into a lot about the Roman cancels, which Roman cancels have always been kind of a staple in Guilty Gear, and they're looking pretty nice in Strive as well. And they just go into more detail about the different things that you can do with Roman cancels in this game, because I don't think we all kind of figured out everything about the Roman cancels in the beta, but also it just kind of tells us how to do some of the things that we might have done accidentally, like the dashes and stuff like that. And if you don't know, Roman cancels work a little bit, they function a little bit differently than they have in previous games. You get this big aura, as you can see here with Soul. When he's doing it, he has this big little circle around him, that if you're hit by that circle, that's when you're affected by it. There's different things it could do, like slow you down with the little clock you see above Kai, representing that you're being slowed down. It could also knock you back, almost kind of like a burst kind of thing. There's a bunch of different things, and so it's just going into it here. So right here, let's look at the different effects and uses of Roman cancels depending on the situation. In Guilty Gear Strive, when you activate a Roman cancel, a shockwave comes out around your character that slows down the movement of your opponent if they are in range. Judging the distance between you and your opponent is key. When activated as you hit the opponent, the shockwave will cause your opponent to bounce up slowly, making it easy to combo them. Which is kind of a weird thing to get used to, but it's also kind of cool because you can do different things with it that you couldn't do before. So if you look right here, you'll see that he bounces up a little bit so that Soul can do some different combos with him. Of course, they're just doing kind of basic combos because, you know, it is what it is. Like right there, that's kind of a cool combo though, because Soul was already in the air when he activated the Roman cancel, but because of the bounce up, it puts Kai a little bit higher than he normally would be off of the that move, which just allows him to come back down with that bandit Bringa, or I think that's what it's called, or revolver, one of the bandit moves. Just freaking punch him back down to the ground. It's freaking cool. This is probably the most basic use of the Roman cancel. It's good for combo extensions, obviously. Get some nice air combos there, which is cool, because he did the DP, got the Roman cancel to put him up in the air. Yeah, there's some cool stuff you can do. So that's the you know, knock-up version of the Roman cancel that you can do in combos. The next one that they showcase is when you're not attacking, the shockwave doesn't blow the opponent back, but temporarily slows them down. Now this is when the clock kind of appears above your head, and I believe you're slowed down until the clock disappears or the time runs out. You can take advantage of the slowdown to beat your opponent's attack and make good use of the moves. Now, if I recall correctly in this video, it shows something pretty cool. I mean, that right there, you're just beating out his attack, obviously, because you're slowing him down. It gives you time to react, which is always nice. Nice little Roman cancel and wake up to see what your opponent's going to do, if they're going to DP, bait out the DP. So you can use the slow down to react basically to your opponent's attack. It's kind of similar to how chain shift is used in Uniclear, where you kind of use it to stop time and be like, all right, what's my opponent doing? Oh, they pressed the button here, so I could just block and bait this out. Or they're about to DP, so I could just block, bait out the DP, and then punish them for it, you know, stuff like that. That's a good use of the slowdown. And this video kind of shows right here how you can use it to cancel your attack to avoid yourself from getting punished. These are staple things you could always do in Guilty Gear, right? You know, oh shoot, I missed my attack, hold on a second, let me cancel that. You know, obviously you can use it for pressure, which is nice. I remember using it in the beta even for that. Not very well, mind you, but I remember using it. When blocking, you'll push the opponent back, kind of like what dead angle used to be. We're only gone over that, so I'm not gonna watch that video. So here it says that the slowdown lasts until the clock above the character disappears. You can also input the motion for a dash just before the Roman cancel activates to swiftly move during the Roman cancel. Now this is something I knew about during the beta and I was trying to do desperately and I just couldn't do. I didn't know you had to dash before the Roman cancel, so I was probably trying to dash after Roman canceling. But this shit here is freaking awesome. Like, it's probably one of the coolest additions they've added to Roman cancels in Strive. So let's take a look at it right here. Ooh, that happens so fast. So you'll notice in his Roman cancels, he kind of dashes downward, I believe. Let's watch it again. Yeah, you'll see a little after image effect from Soul that he's like kind of dashing downwards to get on the ground to do the kind of like mixed up thing right here. Although, I don't know why he would dash down and then just do a standing normal. Like, it's not really much of a mix-up. He should have done a low or something like that. But that's still the cool effect that he's dashing forward, Roman cancels, and dashes downward to do this sort of crazy mix-up, right? And there's other uses for it. Like, let's keep watching the video here. I think, yeah, this is it right here. That's so cool. Using the Roman cancel to kind of dash through the fireball, Kai's fireball. And I think you could do this in Guilty Gear Xrd, but the timing was really precise. I don't know how precise it is in Strive. I'm assuming it's going to be less Strive, or less Strive. It's going to be less precise, but it's still cool to have the options like, I'm just going to run forward and dash through your projectile using Roman cancels. That's so freaking cool. Plus, you're so plus after that because Roman cancels gives you like priority on almost anything, right? You have no negative frames like afterwards because you're ready to attack afterwards. You can do anything after doing that dash, and you get free invincibility through the projectile. It's so good. And then right here, also it just looks cool having this like after image effect on the Roman cancel. Like that's a neat little trick right there. Like he sets up the gun flame and then just dashes forward with the Roman cancel to get in range to throw Kai before the fire hits him. Because if the fire hits him, he can't throw because he's Kai's in block stun, right? So that's a really cool use of using the dash motion with the Roman cancel to get in and do something you wouldn't be able to do normally. That's really freaking cool, you know? I like that a lot. And here's another one I think is kind of neat and pretty new with Strive. Roman cancel itself can be canceled with special moves directly after activation only, as you can move even more quickly than usual afterwards to speed up your offense and allow for follow-up attacks to make a good start on the move. Let's watch this here. This stuff's pretty cool. See, it happens so fast. It happens so fast compared to the other Roman cancels, and you don't see the big like circle effect as much with this one. You notice when Soul does his DP, there's just a brief little burst as he Roman cancels, and he immediately cancels into another special move. That's freaking cool, and I'm pretty sure you could cancel specials with Roman cancels in Xrd as well, but I don't know if you could like cancel into another. You probably could cancel into another special. I don't know. It functioned basically differently, and I think it cost more meter in Xrd or something like that because the meter usage in that was all weird. But it's just really cool how fast this works, how easily you can combo into other special moves. Like, look at that. That opens so many combo potentials. So many combo potential there. This is just more combo stuff that you can do here. And the timing on that kick seems pretty tight too. Look at that air juggle carry into the corner too. Like, that's some pretty cool stuff. Well, look at that. That was tight. So he like does the DP, cancels into the fake gun flame just so that he could be in range to do 2 kicks after before Kai hits the ground. Like, that's so cool, dude. That's so cool. I really hope that there's a lot of different potential combo routes you can do with the Roman cancels and stuff. The beta had, was a little bit too high in damage, so like you could just do the same move over and over again and do a million damage, and it wasn't really like creative. It was just like just gonna punch you into a wall for like 5 times and then you're gonna die. But that's one of the things that they address in the questions down below. So here we go. We got some Q&A here. First they talk about the UI. The UI moving as the health bar decreases is connected with the idea of decreasing the eye movement required to check each gauge. What's the idea behind that? And they talk about that they just, they want to make it so that the player could check their health bar and burst gauge in a single glance. As a result, however, the player could no longer look at a fixed location on the screen to check their gauge, meaning they had to search for it. We've heard your feedback and are reconsidering our own thinking, so we are planning to change the UI's movement, which is a good thing because the way that it worked in the beta was awful. If you haven't seen any footage or don't remember, basically your character's icon would be underneath the health bar, right? It normally starts off at the far right or the far left, depending on which side you're playing on. And as your health decreased, so did your character's icon would move. The only thing is that attached to that little character icon box was both the burst gauge and the risk gauge. So you constantly had to like search for where your risk gauge and burst is to figure out if you had burst or if the risk was building high. It was always in a different spot because the health was always in a different spot. Wasn't very good. Also, it was all bunched up together in a small little box, making it really difficult to read. So I'm glad that they've addressed that. They, heard everybody's feedback and are going to change that because it needs to change. Question 2. In a previous interview, you mentioned you want a greater degree of freedom in combos. This is what I mentioned before. However, in the closed beta, using the same move multiple times in a combo, Bandit Bringer for example, was extremely simple and powerful. I feel this is a departure from your intent. How do you intend to correct this? So, Mr. Katano says, by itself, the existence of combos, including the same move more than once, isn't against our development intent. We really want to remove the concept that, for example, move A only combos into move B, which is very similar to how something like Street Fighter kind of works. You can only link certain combos or certain moves together from certain other moves, which does feel very limiting, and Guilty Gear has never been that way. However, in the beta test, there was almost no advantage to using complicated combos instead of simple, easier combos. One flaw we discovered in the test was that only one combo route left an impression, and there wasn't enough to inspire players to experiment. As far as how we fix this, I apologize, but I can't give a generalized answer. We're continually making adjustments, such as damage, paration, attack properties, meter, impact, and all that stuff. So, this is a good sign, I believe, because they are making changes, or they're aware that the simple kind of repeat the same move over combos might have been a little bit too strong, a little bit too powerful, and they're making adjustments. They've already talked about how they're making adjustments to the damage already to the game, so that'll probably change the different kind of combo routes you could do that are actually beneficial for the game already in and of itself. But they're adjusting all sorts of things. They obviously can't give a clear answer because they're making so many little changes to things here and there that it's all going to affect the way you're going to attack the game and the combo routes. But it looks like they're still trying to let you experiment and be kind of freeform and creative with the way you approach your combos in this game, which is good because, again, that's the way Guilty Gear has always been. But also with the Roman cancel system, it would be a freaking shame if you just couldn't, on the fly, come up with some random combo and be rewarded with, like, at the very least, decent damage for your improv kind of combo routes and stuff. So it looks like they still want to keep that, which is good. Question 3 just talks about character design and the music in general, which I don't want to get too into because honestly I really like the music. I like the direction it's going. It does have a lot of vocal tracks, but it's really freaking awesome, and I honestly really like the character designs. Question 4 brings up an interesting point though. So the question 4 is asking, with these new iterations of Guilty Gear characters and their moves, Some characters like Soul and Potemkin's movesets are very similar, but other characters like Chip, Axel, and Mei lost some iconic tools that have very much redefined the character. Stuff like Chip's teleport, Axel's defensive specials like Benten, parry, and Mei's ability to set up Mr. Dolphin to attack later. How are you striving to balance between something totally new and something recognizable in regards to character playstyle? Why are some of these moves removed and others not? Basically, Ishibatari says that they're not trying to think about other titles while changing character moves, and they're redefining the characters from the ground up. But in the next statement, Kitano kind of says that naturally the concepts behind these characters from prior titles form the basis of that redefining. So this kind of sound like they're contradicting each other, because they clearly want to do something new with this game. That's been their statement from the very beginning, but they're still basing it off the old games, whether or not they're trying to, as Ishibatari says, redefine them from the ground up. There's still going to be those characters' identities from the old games, and that's going to seep in through this game. Basically, what Kitano kind of says is that they're not trying to remove things from previous game necessarily, but just trying to. Okay, let me read what he says first, and then I'll say I'll try to interpret it. At the very least, we aren't developing with the idea of removing things from previous games. To roughly outline some of these redefinitions, Chip, he is extremely fast, but many of his specials are risky. Axel, he excels at really long range, but is heavily disadvantageous at close range. Mei, she has very simple ways to get big damage, but doesn't have many tricks. So, basically what I think he's trying to say is that they're not trying to necessarily remove moves from characters, but they're just trying to they're really trying to redefine these characters in very, very simple archetypes, basically. Like, Chip's fast, but risky at some points. Axel's good long range, bad close range. So, maybe some of the moves that they thought were too good for him at close range, they got rid of, so that he has a defined weakness and a defined strength. And the same thing with Mei. She's supposed to be very simple, straightforward, blow you up with big damage. So she's not going to be very tricky. She's not going to have all these weird setups and all that stuff, which in old games Mei had some pretty, they weren't the most crazy setups for Guilty Gear Xrd, but she had some way to set the dolphin up so that you woke up, you're going to take a dolphin, and then she's going to do some sort of setup, Oki mix-up kind of thing. They're just trying to make it way more defined, I guess. Way more defined in their strengths and way more defined in their weaknesses. However, there does seem to be some inconsistencies with this line of thought so far in the way that they develop their characters, where Soul seems to have everything. It doesn't really seem to have much of a weakness. Same with Kai, honestly. They are the two staple characters of the game. They're supposed to be the balanced, at least Kai is supposed to be the all-around Shoto kind of package that has a little bit of everything. But this line of thought of having really well-defined strengths and weaknesses doesn't seem to apply to all the characters thus far. And maybe that's just some tweaking that they need to do in their characters right now. Honestly, I don't see why stuff like Kai basically doesn't lose any of his old moves and gets some new moves that are really cool. Meanwhile, Mei loses some moves. She does get a new move. I think she gets a new throw or something like that, but loses some iconic moves in the process. Honestly, so far it seems kind of hit and miss with these redefinitions, and honestly it's probably just going to come down to some tweaking and all that stuff to make them more balanced. I honestly don't mind the idea of having really well-defined strengths and really well-defined weaknesses. It makes it very easy to figure out what your win condition is when you're playing up against the characters, what you need to do. Oh, Axel, I just need to rush him down. Even if my character is not a rush down character, I can just rush him down because his defense sucks. But if I'm far away, even if I'm a good neutral character, if I'm really far away from Axel, I might struggle. So I'm going to go in and try to pressure him. Having those defined strengths and weaknesses can be a good thing and lead to each match feeling a little bit different depending on the characters you're going up against, and maybe make you approach your play style a little bit differently. And I think that's fine. It's just a matter of balance, honestly, when it comes to removing the moves, in my opinion. As long as when they remove something from a character, they give the character something else instead, that is really cool. I think that's an okay thing. I think a lot of Mei players don't feel that way about how they've treated Mei in the beta, because they removed some of her core stuff, but they feel like she didn't get enough in return. And I'm sure they're still going to be working on these characters. None of these characters felt like they were fully realized in the beta. Question 5 is probably the most disappointing answer for me, is that they talk about the new air dash in Strive. And if you're not familiar with the way the air dashing works in Strive, backdashing is the same as it's always been. It's a quick little back instant air dash. Fine, really good way to get out of certain situations, or like maybe fake pressure or something like that. Jump forward and then backdash or something like that. Still works fine, but air dashing forward has a little bit of delay. And if you see in this picture, you'll see this little circle kind of appear behind Soul as he's dashing forward. So it makes it very telegraphed when you're going to dash forward for overhead attack. The question is, you've mentioned that this was an attempt to add some depth and address the issue to old air dashes requiring too much practice to react to. This goal may have been accomplished, but with how poor anti-air seemed to be in relation to the strength of jump-ins and how many options the new air dashes creates, the situation still seems skewed heavily towards aggressing in the air, but now with no real regards to neutral interactions with how strong to punish this kind of play. Additionally, the feel of the air dash just isn't as clean as the old one. No, it felt terrible in the beta because you had a delay before the air dash and it took a lot of getting used to, and it still doesn't feel as good in my opinion. Maybe it's more complex, but how do you think this impacts the feel of the flow of the game? Whew, English is hard. Okay. First of all, for the balance between jumps in the anti-grounds in the beta test, the jump-in attacks had relatively small hurt boxes, making it easy to beat out anti-airs. So I guess this wasn't something I didn't really notice too much when playing, but I'm also really bad at anti-airs in general, and so I wasn't always thinking about anti-airing my opponent. But this makes sense. If the hitboxes is too small when jumping in, makes it hard to anti-air, that's fine. They're going to change this aspect with testing and plan to extend the hurt box of the aerial attacks downward a bit to make it a little bit easier to anti-air. That's fine. And then Ishiwatari says, after considering the pros and cons between the intuitive feeling of old air dashes and the new mechanics in this game, we have decided that the current new direction will create something more interesting than the prior version. We're proceeding with development in that direction, which makes me very sad because I hate the delay on the instant air dash. It feels so bad, dude. It feels so bad, and it's so telegraphed. I do think that by the end of the beta though, like when I got really used to how the air dashes felt, there was a way to, like, if you instant air dash and then attacked right away, it would kind of stop the instant air dash from going all the way, and you'd kind of get this like downward momentum with your attack. So this could lead to some, especially on wake up, I know like Kai could do this really well, you could do some crazy cross up, like overhead cross ups that way, because of the angle of which you would be approaching on the instant air dash. So that was kind of cool. There is that aspect to it, but it just really feels not good. It doesn't feel good to play. And if I'm not mistaken, I think different characters have different speeds at which the delay affects them and all that stuff. So especially with looking at the trailers for like Milia, she looks like she instant air dashes really fast. So we'll see. I am not happy with that, but it's what they've decided. So gotta get used to it, I guess. Also, instant air dashing was like one of the funnest things to do. It's one of the funnest things to do in Dragon Ball FighterZ, and it's one of the funnest things to do in Guilty Gear Xrd. And it never felt in any way too hard to react to an instant air dash in Xrd, in my opinion. Honestly, the instant air dashes in Dragon Ball FighterZ feel faster than the instant air dashes in Dragon Ball Xrd. No, Guilty Gear Xrd does. So if the instant air dashes are fine for everybody in Dragon Ball, why is it not? I don't know, man. I'm just upset that there's a freaking delay. Whatever, let's move on. Okay, so question 6 talks about the wall break mechanic in Strive, which is a brand new feature. The increased intention was often considered not worth it by players, so they would try not to cause the wall break by not finishing their combo or not using certain moves. Are you considering changing the way wall breaks work in order to prevent this behavior, or perhaps changing the reward upon wall break? The answer, to be completely honest, as the beta test, we believe that there is greater merit in breaking the wall rather than staying in the corner. Of course, we will continue testing for balance before the release. They also do not intend to completely deny the choice to break the wall. They feel that this is one of the elements of freedom and mischief in a good sense. They have a link over here, kind of links to this video right here, as they kind of talk about mischief, I guess. And it just sounds like their idea of mischief being weird stuff, crazy stuff that can happen all the time. As far as mischief goes, I would kind of say the word chaos instead. Like, Guilty Gear has always been a very chaotic game, just scrambles and all kinds of chaos just ensuing on the screen at all times in the game. And it sounds like they want to keep that element to the game. It's kind of one of the things that I believe defines Guilty Gear, and it's good that they want to keep that in there. And it's good that they want to keep the freedom of deciding whether or not you want to break the wall in the first place. And I think this idea that they have where they believe that the wall break is more of a benefit than just keeping them in the corner goes along with something I talked about in one of my previous videos. The idea of risk being way more important in this game. The way that the Gatling system works, where it kind of limits how far you can pressure your opponent, using your meter with Roman cancels to extend that so that you can build up that risk gauge and kind of keep your opponent locked down in pressure. And I think their idea is that this tension buff that you get from breaking the wall, because your tension fills up really fast after you break the wall, right? So I think their idea of this tension buff being more important involves that risk and being able to pressure your opponent afterwards. However, I don't think it feels that way at first. Maybe it'll feel that way as we get more experience with the game and the damage numbers are tweaked and all that stuff, and high level players are just playing Guilty Gear at the best that it can be. And tension is so important because you're constantly using it on offense and defense. You just need every bit of tension you can get. Being in the corner, or having your opponent in the corner, is just so valuable in every single fighting game. Every single fighting game, even the ones that are very neutral based, very slow paced, having your opponent locked down in a corner is so advantageous. It's so beneficial to you that it's hard to say that going back to the neutral state at all for anything is worth it. So I think they honestly need to add a little bit more incentive. Maybe if they can add something like, because I think right now the way it works, when the wall break happens and you get reset back to neutral, you do get the tension buff, but you both kind of start back at 0. You both start, can press buttons at the same time and will, move at the same start speed basically. You don't get any advantage on wake up or anything like that. What they should do is, at the very least, is make it so that your opponent that you send through the wall when you break the wall has a slower wake up time or recovery time than you. That way you have the opportunity to run up and give a meaty wake up. That way you get the tension advantage and you don't lose your offensive pressure. Sure, you might be back to neutral, but at least you still have the advantage. Because otherwise it feels like you're just giving up your advantage for a little bit of meter gain. A little bit of meter gain. And honestly, you gain so much meter in this game already as is. It's not really, that's another thing. Maybe that would incentivize you to do the wall break more, as if they took away the meter gain, but that would just feel bad. So I don't know. Hopefully they still address this issue a little bit more. Like, it's the ideas and concepts that they're talking about sound good. They want freedom. They want a bunch of mischief or chaos to ensue in Guilty Gear. But some of the new experimental ideas that they're working with don't seem to work as intended, basically. So as long as they do a little bit of tweaking here and there, I think that they could really have something cool, because the wall break mechanic is cool. It looks cool. It could be cool. They just need to tweak it maybe a little bit. I don't know. That's how I feel about it anyways. And then the final question just kind of addresses what's the most difficult aspect of developing this game, and that's creating a new feel and new excitement out of the genealogy of Guilty Gear. And I guess it just hammers home this idea and I guess theme that they've been throwing out since the beginning of this game's development, the idea of making Guilty Gear new. They just want to make this game something new, not like the old Guilty Gear, but with some of those old legacies still in place. to still have that Guilty Gear feel. So that's the Developer's Backyard, the second one that they've released, and I'm glad that they're releasing this. They also say that they're going to release another one in August, and this is freaking great. This is great to have the developers actually communicate with us and tell us what's going on in their heads and what they're thinking about while developing this game, and I hope they continue doing this even long after the game has been released, when they're doing patch notes and all that stuff, because this is something that is honestly desperately needed in the fighting game, and all fighting games everywhere. A lot of, like, you know, Street Fighter, Uniclear, all that stuff, every other fighting game doesn't really talk to their community about what's going on with the game. So this is all good stuff. Let me know what you guys think about all this stuff in the comments down below, and I'll see you all in the next one.